Hey, this is David Walker coming at you. Trx90 rear shock mod. Putting a 14 and a half, 15-inch shock on the rear of your Trx90, as opposed to your 9 or 10-inch shock that really doesn't have any travel. Real quick, I'm just going to get straight to it. I'm not going to try to waste a lot of time in this video. This is what the bracket looks like. There's two sides, a right and a left. There's a bolt you'll see right here in the bottom of it. That bolt, once it's mounted on the machine, that bolt has this washer that is filling up this gap, if you will. What it does, you can see it right here, it rests against this back bar. It keeps the bracket from wanting to pivot forward if these bolts are loose or not doing their job. So, real quick, we've got a chain tensioner that goes on first. Here's our chain tensioner. It's not really a tensioner, it just maintains your tension, keeps your chain tension consistent. It's going to go on just like this. The roller's already mounted on it. You're going to slip it in from the back side, just like this one is, in this hole that's already in your frame. Put the washer on, put the nut on. 14 foot-pounds is what you're going to torque this to. The chain goes over the roller, and that's going to keep your chain from rubbing on this tube. It's going to keep your chain from eating up your side cover that goes here, and most importantly, it's going to keep your chain tension consistent throughout travel. Once your rear end is all the way up and your shock is fully compressed, your chain should only have about 1/4 of an inch of movement. Once your chain's sitting natural, about 3/4 of an inch of movement, and once it's fully extended like this, probably closer to an inch of movement. So make sure, a really important thing, once you get all this mounted up, fully compress your rear end and make sure your chain has some sort of slack. If not, it's going to be pulling on this front sprocket, and it's going to be working on these bearings. It's going to be working on your motor mounts, so you don't want to be breaking stuff over trying to improve something. Shock top eye. If you're going to modify a shock, about 17 millimeters wide is where that needs to be. Put you a couple of washers up here to keep any rubbing friction down. When you mount this bracket on here, there's a spacer right here in the center. I'll show you this spacer. Here it is. It's basically just two nuts that are 11 millimeters wide. This is a 22 millimeter wide gap in this bracket. If you don't put these spacer in here, when you tighten this bolt, you're going to squish these two brackets together. So that's why we want to do that. So bracket bolt goes through with the spacer in, nut goes on the other side, leave them all loose. Same thing on the bottom. Put your bolt through, all the way through the shock. There's going to be a washer on either side of the shock, just like this right here. So bolt goes through, washer on either side of the shock. On the other side you got a nut. Now you see this big nut that I'm including with the bracket. That is for this brake line. Don't let me get ahead of myself. Hold on. My bad. Leave all these bolts loose until everything is together and you set the quad down on the ground. Once you set the quad down on the ground, this bracket is going to fold back and seat against this bar. Once that happens, then you can tighten these bolts up. These top two bolts, this top one bolt, it goes to 45 foot-pounds. The bottom bolt down here, 10 foot-pounds. That's the one holding the actual shock. 10 foot-pounds, back off 1/4 of a turn. And that way, what that's going to do is going to keep this from binding up. You don't want to get that bottom bracket too tight. It is a locking nut, so it's good to go. Last thing you're going to do is put this bolt in here. It's got this washer on the head of it, and that is basically going to keep this bracket from going forward. The old design that I had, I'll show you real quick. The old design that I had, it's got a real tall lip right here. People had problems getting that lip over the swing arm. There's only one small spot it would go, so effectively I trim these farther out so it's easier to get on, and then I use this bolt with a washer, and that closes out that area, so it makes it good to go. The last thing you're going to do, I mentioned this spacer on the rear brake cable. You got to have this spacer on here. This brake cable, once you get this extra travel, it's about 1/2 inch too short. this spacer is going to lengthen your brake cable out. You're going to jack it up so that the back tires are off the ground, and adjust this brake till your back tires spin, and you have just a little bit of play in your front brake pedal. So adjust that to your liking. And as far as I know, I think I've covered everything. Real quick, torque specs: 14 foot-pounds on the tensioner bolt, 45 foot-pounds on the top bracket bolt, 10 foot-pounds on the bottom. Back it off a quarter of a turn. Make sure your shock will move freely and it's not bound up. Other than that, that's going to be about it. If anybody has any problems, definitely let me know. You can email me, you can PM me off Facebook, you can find me on YouTube, Quick Fixer, KWIKFIXER, and I appreciate y'all looking. Thanks.